I should have never taken the night shift at the mall. They told me it was simple. Stay in the security office, make your rounds, follow the rules. But the rules, they weren't normal. No mirrors in the hallways, no looking at the mannequins for too long, and the most important one, never open the door at the end of the north hallway. That night, I broke one, and I think never truly came back. The cameras showed an empty mall, but when I stepped into the north hallway, it didn't end. The floor stretched longer and longer, tile after tile. Fluorescent lights above buzzed, then popped, plunging sections into shadow. Every step echoed, not once, but twice, as if someone followed just out of reach. I walked faster, but the hallway never ended. I should have turned back. The walls on either side of me seemed to breathe, flexing in and out like lungs filling with stale air. The posters that lined the corridor in daylight ads for clothing sales. 4 food court specials were now melted shapes, colors bleeding into one another like wet paint. I couldn't make out a single face, only the impression of people watching, turning their heads as I passed. My flashlight, the one clipped to my belt, flickered on by itself. I hadn't touched it. Its beam stretched unnaturally far down the corridor, as though the hallway wanted me to keep walking, wanted me to chase the light it offered. But the moment I stepped forward, the beam receded, teasing, always, just a little beyond my reach. Behind me, the faintest scuffing sound dragged along the tile. I froze, heart hammering in my chest, and turned. The hallway was empty, but the scuff came again, closer this time, timed perfectly with the rhythm of my breath. I thought of the rule book, the one I had skimmed during orientation. Rule number 4. Never acknowledge the echoes. I whispered to myself that this was a dream, that I had fallen asleep in the chair back in the security office, that all of this was some trick of exhaustion. But the cold sweat trickling down my spine told me otherwise. My body knew what my mind didn't want to admit. This place was real, and I was lost inside it. I pressed my hand to the wall. It was wet. When I pulled back, thick black residue clung to my skin, smelling faintly of rust and something older, something like rot. I wiped it on my uniform, but the smear only spread, marking me. The ceiling lights ahead flickered and hummed louder, building into a pressure that squeezed my skull. My teeth ached with it, like the sound was crawling inside my head. One by one, the bulbs shattered, glass tinkling to the floor, until I was swallowed in near darkness. Only the faint red glow of an emergency exit sign remained. But even that light seemed too dim, like it was being swallowed by the dark. I picked up my pace, then broke into a run. My breath came ragged, and my footsteps clapped against the tile. Still, that other sound, the one that wasn't mine, followed. Closer now, faster. I dared not look back. The tiles beneath me shifted in color, from pale white to a dull gray, then darker, until it felt like I was running on slabs of stone. The air thickened, smelling of damp earth instead of floor polish. My chest tightened. The mall was gone, or at least the mall I recognized. Somewhere far ahead, I heard the faint creak of hinges, the kind of sound a heavy wooden door makes when it slowly opens. It echoed down the endless hall, low and deliberate. My stomach turned to ice. That door wasn't supposed to exist. I slowed against every instinct and forced myself to keep walking toward the sound. My legs trembled, and with each step, I felt the weight of invisible eyes pressing harder against me. The hallway was no longer empty. Something waited, patient, just beyond the edge of the dark. Halfway through that impossible hallway, I saw it. A door, plain, wooden, out of place. There wasn't supposed to be a door here. I checked the blueprints when I started the job. But the rule was clear. Do not open the north hallway door. So why was it waiting for me? The knob twitched. Not from my hand, but from the inside. Something was waiting to come out. And still, I reached for it. My hand hovered just above the knob, trembling despite my effort to steady it. The metal seemed to radiate a faint warmth, like someone on the other side had just been holding it. I pulled my hand back, heart pounding, but the door gave a small, patient shudder, as if it had felt my hesitation and wanted to remind me it was still there. I remembered the head of security's warning the night I signed the paperwork. He didn't look at me when he said it. He just pointed at the page with a thick finger and muttered, "Asterisk. This is the one that matters. Don't touch that door." He hadn't explained why, and I hadn't asked. Now, standing in front of it, I wished I had. The silence pressed down heavy around me, broken only by the faint hum of a dying light bulb above. I leaned closer, listening. On the other side, something shifted, slow, deliberate, a scrape, as though bare feet were dragging across a rough floor. My throat tightened, told myself to walk away, to turn around, to follow the rules. But the longer I stared, the more the wood seemed to breathe, swelling outward with each inhale and pulling inward with each exhale. The door was alive, or at least pretending to be. I whispered, "Don't do it," to myself, as if hearing the words aloud would anchor me, but my body didn't obey. My hand rose again, fingers stretching toward the brass knob that twitched in response like a pulse. When my skin finally touched the metal, it burned not painfully, but deep, like a shock that traveled up my arm into my chest. The hall around me seemed to warp, the buzzing lights elongating into streaks that bent toward the door as though the entire mall leaned into my choice. I gripped the knob tighter. It turned on its own, slow and deliberate, as though welcoming my weakness. My knees locked, and I thought of running, but the air behind me felt thick, heavy, impossible to push through. The only way left was forward. The latch clicked, sound too loud for such a small movement. It echoed down the endless hall like a gunshot, bouncing back again and again until I felt it rattle in my teeth. Held my breath, waiting. The crack between door and frame widened. Darkness poured out, not just shadow, but something heavier, like smoke without form. It curled along the floor, winding around my shoes, cold enough to sting. I stumbled back, but couldn't look away. Something whispered my name from inside. Not a voice I recognized, but it spoke perfectly in my own cadence, stretching each syllable as if tasting it. My legs shook, but I leaned closer. I wanted to hear it again. The smell hit me, damp earth, copper, and something sweet that turned my stomach. I gagged and covered my mouth, but the whisper laughed softly, mimicking the sound of my retching, as though mocking me. I swung the flashlight beam toward the opening, but it bent away from the crack, swallowed whole. No light passed through. I could only see deeper blackness, shifting faintly, like a body moving just out of reach. The knob jerked in my hand, not once, twice, stronger the second time. Whatever was inside wanted me to let go. It wanted out. My heart slammed in my chest so hard I felt dizzy, but I couldn't release it. The door had me now. Then, without warning, the movement stopped. The knob went still. The air grew unbearably silent, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. I dared to hope that whatever was inside had gone. That's when the whisper came again, closer this time, but no longer muffled by wood. It came from behind me. When the door opened, I saw myself. Same uniform, same flashlight, same heavy breathing, but their eyes, they didn't blink. They smiled, wide and wrong, and whispered my own voice back at me. You shouldn't be here. I dropped my flashlight. When I picked it back up, they were gone, but the echo of my footsteps kept following. When I turned, there it was me, standing in the glow of the flickering light, wearing the same uniform, holding the same flashlight, even breathing in time with me. For a moment, I thought the stress had made me stumble upon a mirror, but no mirror stood in that hallway, just me. I tried to swallow, but my throat had dried into sandpaper. The other me tilted its head, just slightly, like it was studying me with amusement, though its eyes never blinked. They glistened too much, too wet, like glass marbles pulled from water. I whispered a shaky hello, but the sound of my own voice seemed wrong, as though it didn't belong to me anymore. The figure repeated the word back, exactly the same tone, the same hesitation, the same breath between syllables. Only it stretched the ending, making the O linger just a fraction too long, curling into a sound that didn't feel human. The grin spread across its face, wide and sharp, like skin stretched too tightly over a jaw. My stomach lurched. That grin wasn't mine. It couldn't be. I never smiled like that. When it spoke again, the words vibrated in my bones, though they came from my own mouth. You shouldn't be here. The phrase wasn't loud, but it carried weight, thick and final, like a verdict. The flashlight slipped from my hand, clattering against the floor. For a split second, everything went dark. I scrambled to grab it, palms slick with sweat, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted to escape. When the beam returned, the hallway was empty, but the silence was wrong. To hollow. My own breathing sounded distant, like it was coming from the end of a tunnel. And underneath it, faint but steady, were footsteps, the same weight, the same rhythm. Mine, I froze. Every instinct told me to stay still, to make no sound. The footsteps stopped too. I exhaled slowly, and the echo of my breath came a moment later, slightly delayed, as though another chest had copied the motion. I turned my flashlight down the endless hall. The beam stretched forward, cutting through nothing. But I swore I saw the faint curve of a shadow moving just beyond its reach. The shape was familiar, too familiar. My skin prickled with the sensation of being studied, and I'd watched, studied, like I was a specimen under glass, and something that looked like me was learning how to wear me properly. A cold thought clawed its way into my head. What if it wasn't copying me? What if I was copying it? What if the me I thought I was, the breathing, the heartbeat, the trembling, wasn't even mine anymore? I squeezed my eyes shut and told myself over and over, this is a dream. This is a dream. But even as I whispered, the echo returned louder, clearer, and crueler. My own voice repeated, this is a dream. This is a dream, with a laugh curling at the end. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that sinks into bone, heavy and suffocating. My breath fogged, even though the mall was never supposed to drop below room temperature. My other self had taken the warmth, the life, and left me in the shell of it. The beam of my flashlight flickered once more. In that stuttering light, for just a heartbeat, saw it again standing a few steps closer, its head cocked, smile still stretching unnaturally wide. And then the bulb steadied, and the space was empty again. I wanted to run. Every muscle in my body begged to move, but the thought crept in, slow and poisonous. If I ran, what would follow me? Would it be the thing I saw? Or would it be me? The echo of footsteps began again, keeping perfect time with my pulse. I thought I was in the mall, but the walls shifted, stretched, bent around me. I was in a house now, one I almost recognized. The smell of old wood, the creak of stairs, my childhood home. But every room was wrong. The kitchen had no windows. The living room was lined with doors that led to more doors, and upstairs heard someone moving, slow, careful, waiting for me to climb. The staircase was the same as I remembered, Thin carpet worn down in the middle, the wooden railing smooth from years of hands sliding across it. But it felt steeper, longer, as if climbing it would take more effort than it should. Each step groaned beneath my weight, not with the familiar sound of wood, but something wetter, like stepping on soaked cloth. The air carried a heaviness, a dampness that made my skin prickle. The scent of old wood was stronger now, laced with something metallic. I paused halfway up, listening. The movement above me stopped the second I froze, as though whoever was waiting had been mimicking my pace. I whispered, a shaky breath, and the sound echoed back from the floor above, a perfect imitation, only slightly delayed. My heart lurched, and I gripped the railing tighter, the wood slick beneath my palm. When I lifted my hand, it was streaked with something dark, almost black in the dim light. The landing stretched far longer than it ever had in my memory. Doors lined both sides, their frames crooked, some smaller than they should be, some taller, like a funhouse reflection of the real house. None of them were closed properly. Each one sat slightly ajar, showing just enough of a shadow inside to hint at something waiting. I tried to call out, maybe to ask who was there, maybe to remind myself of my own voice, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, a whisper slithered through the hall, too low to make out, though the tone was unmistakably familiar. It was my voice again. The floorboards beneath me bowed with each step, sagging as though waterlogged. From one of the doors on the left, I heard the faint sound of dripping, slow, rhythmic, like water into a bucket. But the smell leaking out wasn't water. It was copper, sharp and unmistakable. I reached for the nearest doorknob, hesitated, then pulled my hand back. The knob was breathing, expanding and contracting in time with the sound of my own lungs. I stumbled away, but the door creaked open on its own, showing nothing but a stretch of hallway identical to the one I was already in. I turned sharply to the right, but the wall shifted before my eyes, peeling back like wet wallpaper to reveal another staircase. It wasn't carpeted like the first. It was bare wood, blackened and splintered, leading upward into shadow. The sound of movement returned, this time from directly above. My body screamed to leave, to run back down, but when I looked over my shoulder, the staircase I'd climbed was gone. In its place was another hallway, longer, narrower, pulsing faintly as if the house itself had veins. The air grew colder the higher I climbed. My breath came out in shallow bursts, each cloud of mist sucked upward toward the ceiling. The sound of someone walking above grew heavier, closer, as though they knew I was coming and wanted me to hurry. When I reached the top, the hallway ended in a single door. It was different from the others, perfectly fitted, perfectly still, with no gaps or shadows leaking through. Chala's bedroom door. Hadn't seen it in years, but I recognized the faint scratch marks at the bottom where I'd once dragged a chair. The knob turned slowly on its own. Faint light bled through the crack, warm, almost comforting, but it flickered like candlelight, unstable, alive. I stepped closer, every muscle tight, heart pounding in my ears. From the other side came the sound of breathing, not steady, not calm, ragged, uneven, as though whatever was inside, had been waiting for far too long. The door creaked open, inch by inch. I held my breath, waiting to see what waited in the room that should have been mine, but felt like it had never belonged to me at all. The stairs didn't lead to a bedroom. They led outside, came to a forest that shouldn't exist. The trees twisted upward, branches like veins across a blood-red sky. Leaves whispered without wind. Every shadow looked like it wanted to move. I heard children laughing, faint, broken. When I turned, I saw mannequins between the trees, the same mannequins from the mall, only now they were closer. And closer. The forest floor was soft beneath my shoes, spongy like moss, but wet as if it had been raining for days. Each step released a faint squelch, and I was certain if I stood too long in one place, the the earth would try to swallow me. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of iron and wet bark. And though the trees crowded thick, their shapes bent away just enough to funnel me deeper. The mannequins didn't move in any natural way. They didn't turn or shift when I looked at them. Instead, they appeared in new places whenever my eyes left them, edging closer with every blink. Some wore the clothing from the stores I patrolled, discount dresses, jeans with tags still dangling. Others were naked, their plastic torsos cracked, their limbs slightly warped, as though they had been melted and remade. The children's laughter echoed again, weaving through the branches. First, I thought it was playful, but the longer I listened, the more wrong it felt. Each laugh ended too abruptly, like a recording cut off mid-track, replaced by the next one in a looping cycle. When I tried to follow the sound, it seemed to circle back behind me. The sky above glowed with a pulsing red light, though no sun or moon was visible, throbbed faintly like a heartbeat overhead, and with every pulse, the mannequins appeared a step closer. One stood just ahead, tilted slightly forward, its eyeless face aimed at me. I whispered to myself that they were only mannequins, plastic and bolts, hollow things with no power. But then one of them tilted its head. The sound wasn't creak of joints, but a wet snap, like something breaking inside flesh. My stomach turned, and bile rose in my throat. I tried to move faster, weaving through the twisted trees, but the forest offered no path. Each direction looked the same, trunks gnarled and roots sprawling like veins. Yet, no matter where I turned, the mannequins lined the way, waiting like sentinels. I stumbled when one of the branches brushed across my shoulder. It wasn't wood. It was cold, rigid plastic. A mannequin's arm reached from the tree itself, as if the figures were growing out of the bark. Their hands reached toward me, fingers stretched unnaturally long, nails sharper than they should be. A whisper trickled through the forest, not laughter this time, but voices speaking low and in unison. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt them crawl across my skin, seeping into me like the chill of winter air. The mannequins' heads began to turn toward one another, as if listening to the same secret. I broke into a run. My legs carried me blindly, crashing through undergrowth, shoving past branches that scratched deep lines into my arms. The laughter returned, closer now, no longer distant. It felt like it was spilling out of the trees themselves, vibrating through the wood. One mannequin appeared directly in my path, its body twisted backward so that its head was staring at me upside down. I crashed into it, sending it toppling, but when it hit the ground, it didn't sound like plastic. It sounded like bone snapping beneath skin. The figure twitched, limbs jerking, trying to rise again. Panic clawed at me, and I ran harder. My breath came ragged, fogging in the chill air. My flashlight flickered wildly in my hand, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe on their own. For a second, I thought I saw dozens of faces in the trees, pressed into the bark like screaming mouths, frozen mid-cry. Ahead, through the thick of twisted branches, I saw a break, clearing. My chest tightened with desperate hope, and I stumbled toward it, lungs burning. The mannequins didn't follow. Not directly, they just kept appearing behind me, beside me, waiting for me to falter. When I burst into the clearing, the ground fell silent beneath my steps. The earth here was smooth, black, reflective like glass. Above, the red sky pulsed brighter, bleeding into the surface below, until it felt like I was standing on the inside of an eye. In the center stood a single mannequin, larger than the rest, taller than any human, its limbs too long, its neck stretched like rope. It raised one arm slowly, pointing at me with a stiff, jerking motion. And then, in the silence that followed, I realized the laughter had stopped. That was worse, far worse. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought it might crack my ribs. I tried to back away, but the glassy surface under my feet rippled like water, pulling me forward with each step. The mannequin's hand lowered, and in the stillness of the clearing, tamed, A whisper slid directly into my ear, though no mouth had moved. Stay. I ran until the forest opened, and there it was, a train station, rusting, abandoned, but alive with a low hum. The schedule board flickered with names I couldn't read, letters rearranging themselves. A train screeched into the platform, doors opening into blackness. I heard an announcement, but it wasn't in words. It was in screams. The mannequins ain't. They were on the train. In one seat, in the very front, was empty, waiting for me. The station stretched out before me, far larger than it should have been, swallowing the forest in its presence. The platform was cracked, weeds jutting through, but when I listened closely, the faint clatter of footsteps echoed as if hundreds of unseen passengers still rushed to catch their trains. The air was thick with the metallic temps of rust and ozone, carrying the memory of electricity long dead. The schedule board flickered violently overhead, its bulbs sparking, rearranging symbols that refused to stay still. K. Letters formed words, then collapsed into nonsense before I could understand them. Once, for only a breath, my name appeared there, clear and unmistakable, before vanishing back into the chaos of shifting text. My stomach dropped as though gravity had suddenly deepened. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, shaking dust loose from the rafters. The sound grew, metallic and monstrous, until the train screeched into view. Its exterior was eaten away by rust, but the windows gleamed black and smooth, reflecting nothing. Steam hissed out in great bursts, curling across the platform like living fog. The announcement crackled overhead, but it wasn't a voice I could recognize as human. It was a blend of wails and shrieks, distorted and layered, echoing so loudly it rattled my bones. It wasn't language, it was hunger disguised as words. The doors slid open with a shudder, revealing nothing but a vast, black interior. No lights, no seats visible at first glance. But the moment I stepped closer, I saw them. Dozens of mannequins sat neatly inside, their rigid forms tilted slightly toward the door. As though they had been waiting for me to arrive. Each one was dressed differently, but all of them bore fragments of familiarity. A jacket I'd worn in high school, a scarf my mother once owned, a hat I'd lost years ago. Their clothing was stolen from my memories, stitched onto their lifeless bodies. The mannequins' heads tilted in unison, jerking toward me with a sharp creak of plastic. My breath caught in my throat. They didn't move otherwise, just stared, their eyeless faces fixed in my direction. The air inside the car was heavy, suffocating, as though it wasn't air at all, but something thicker waiting to seep into me. One seat stood empty, right in the front row. Its surface gleamed faintly in the dim light, almost inviting. The faintest indentation in the cushion suggested someone had been sitting there only moments ago. My skin crawled as I realized it wasn't waiting for someone. It was waiting for me. The rumble beneath the platform grew louder, shaking the rails, vibrating into my chest. I felt as though the station itself was pushing me forward, the glassy floor tilting ever so slightly toward the open train. My feet inched forward before I could think to stop them. I gripped the edge of the doorway to steady myself, but the metal wasn't cold. It pulsed faintly, a warmth that traveled up my arm like blood. I snatched my hand back in disgust, but the mark lingered, an echo of something alive hiding inside the steel. The mannequins did not blink, did not move, but I swore I could hear the faint clicking of teeth in the silence. Not human teeth, something sharper, layered, grinding together in anticipation. It came from deep within the train, past the rows of faceless passengers. The announcement blared again, the screeching more insistent now, demanding. My knees buckled as the sound wormed into my skull. I wanted to cover my ears, but my hands wouldn't obey, frozen stiff at my sides. It felt less like a command to board and more like a sentence being carried out. Air behind me shifted, colder than the platform breeze. I didn't need to look to know what was there. The mannequins from the forest. They had followed, their presence pressing close, waiting to herd me forward. My chest tightened, caught between what waited inside and what stood at my back. The empty seat seemed to glow now, a subtle pulse of light in the dark. My name flickered across the schedule board again, brighter this time, joined by numbers that looked like a departure time. The second the clock ticked down, the doors would close, with me inside or without. I couldn't tell which choice was worse. The station stretched out before me, far larger than it should have been, swallowing the forest in its presence. The platform was cracked, weeds jutting through, but when I listened closely, the faint clatter of footsteps echoed as if hundreds of unseen passengers still rushed to catch their trains. The air was thick with the metallic temps of rust and ozone, carrying the memory of electricity long dead. The schedule board flickered violently overhead, its bulbs sparking, rearranging symbols that refused to stay still. Letters formed words, then collapsed into nonsense before I could understand them. Once, for only a breath, my name appeared there, clear and unmistakable, before vanishing back into the chaos of shifting text. My stomach dropped, as though gravity had suddenly deepened. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, shaking dust loose from the rafters. The sound grew, metallic and monstrous, until a train screeched into view. Its exterior was eaten away by rust, but the windows gleamed black and smooth, reflecting nothing. Steam hissed out in great bursts, curling across the platform like living fog. The announcement crackled overhead, but it wasn't a voice I could recognize as human. It was a blend of wails and shrieks, distorted and layered, echoing so loudly it rattled my bones. It wasn't language, it was hunger disguised as words. The doors slid open with a shudder, revealing nothing but a vast, black interior. No lights, no seats visible at first glance, but the moment I stepped closer, I saw them. Dozens of mannequins sat neatly inside, their rigid forms tilted slightly toward the door, as though they had been waiting for me to arrive. Each one was dressed differently, but all of them bore fragments of familiarity. A jacket I'd worn in high school, a scarf my mother once owned, a hat I'd lost years ago. Their clothing was stolen from my memories, stitched onto their lifeless bodies. The mannequins' heads tilted in unison, jerking toward me with a sharp creak of plastic. My breath caught in my throat. They didn't move, otherwise just stared, their eyeless faces fixed in my direction. The air inside the car was heavy, suffocating, as though it wasn't air at all, but something thicker, waiting to seep into me. One seat stood empty, right in the front row. Its surface gleamed faintly in the dim light, almost inviting. The faintest indentation in the cushion suggested someone had been sitting there only moments ago. My skin crawled as I realized it wasn't waiting for someone. It was waiting for me. The rumble beneath the platform grew louder, shaking the rails, vibrating into my chest. I felt as though the station itself was pushing me forward, the glassy floor tilting ever so slightly toward the open train. My feet inched forward before I could think to stop them. I gripped the edge of the doorway to steady myself, but the metal wasn't cold. It pulsed faintly, a warmth that traveled up my arm like blood. I snatched my hand back in disgust, but the mark lingered, an echo of something alive, hiding inside the steel. The mannequins did not blink, did not move, but I swore I could hear the faint clicking of teeth in the silence. Not human teeth, something sharper, layered, grinding together in anticipation. It came from deep within the train, past the rows of faceless passengers. The announcement blared again, the screeching more insistent now, demanding. My knees buckled as the sound wormed into my skull. I wanted to cover my ears, but my hands wouldn't obey, frozen stiff at my sides. It felt less like a command to board and more like a sentence being carried out. The air behind me shifted, colder than the platform breeze. I didn't need to look to know what was there. The mannequins from the forest. They had followed, their presence, pressing close, waiting to herd me forward. My chest tightened, caught between what waited inside and what stood at my back. The empty seat seemed to glow now, a subtle pulse of light in the dark. My name flickered across the schedule board again, brighter this time, joined by numbers that looked like a departure time. The second the clock ticked down, the doors would close, with me inside or without. I couldn't tell which choice was worse. Do you want me to keep expanding the train station scene until the moment the doors close? Or should I push forward into the descent toward the basement and the faceless figure? I staggered as my body hit the concrete floor, knees buckling, palms scraping against grit and rust flakes. The air here was different, thicker, damp, every breath carrying the stench of mildew and something fouler that clung to the back of my throat. I coughed, and the sound echoed too loudly, bouncing back as if the basement were far larger than I could see. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping steadily, their rhythm uneven, almost like the beat of a heart. Each droplet hit the floor with a sharp splash that rang longer than it should, a metallic echo that seemed to chase me through the dark. My flashlight sputtered, but refused to die, its weak beam trembling across walls stained with black streaks I couldn't identify. I caught sight of the figure in the corner, almost by accident. At first it seemed like a shadow that didn't belong, darker than the rest, an absence of light shaped vaguely like a person. Then it shifted, not with movement, but with presence, as though the space itself bent to acknowledge it. Tall, too tall, shoulders brushing the low pipes, body stretched unnaturally thin. It stood perfectly still, faceless, its head smooth like wet clay, its arms dangling far longer than they should, fingertips grazing the floor. My stomach dropped as if the ground had tilted beneath me. I blinked once, and it was closer. 10 feet gone in an instant, though it hadn't taken a step. My chest seized, a cold sweat breaking across my forehead. I blinked again, unwilling, and it was almost within reach, 5 feet away, its empty face tilted downward as though peering directly into me. I held my breath, afraid even the rise and fall of my chest would invite it closer. The basement around me faded, swallowed in darkness, until there was nothing but me, the stench of rust, and the figure looming just out of touch. Its hand rose slowly, unnaturally smooth, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. For the briefest moment, I thought it was reaching to harm me. But when the light caught its skin, or whatever passed for skin, I realized the hand was my own. Same lines, same scars, same faint burn on the knuckle I'd gotten years ago. My knees went weak. I stepped back, but the floor groaned beneath me, soft as if hollow. The pipes above let out a hiss, spraying a burst of steam that filled the air with a scalding mist. Through it, the figure seemed to multiply, its body splitting into faint silhouettes that all leaned toward me. I pressed my back against the wall, breath coming in ragged bursts. The figure mirrored me exactly, shoulders tensing, chest heaving, fingers twitching in time with my own. But its faceless head didn't turn away, it stared without eyes, its attention fixed and suffocating. The dripping from the pipes grew louder, faster, until it wasn't dripping at all, but pouring. Dark liquid streamed down the walls, pooling at my feet. I looked down, and the reflection staring back wasn't mine. It was the figure's head, featureless and smooth, bobbing faintly in the ripples. A sound rattled through the basement then, low and guttural, like something large exhaling after centuries of silence. The walls trembled. Dust rained down. I realized with horror that the sound had come from its chest, my chest, because, as it echoed, I felt my lungs shudder in the same rhythm. I tried to scream, but no sound left my throat. The figure's blank face seemed to ripple, the surface quivering as though something beneath was struggling to push through. The outline of a mouth pressed faintly against the smoothness, opening and closing in silence. My hand moved closer, stretching toward my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. When its palm finally touched me, There was no impact, no pressure, simply sank in, sliding into my body like water. My heart stuttered painfully, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if it was still mine at all. The basement spun, the walls buckling inward, the pipes groaning as though collapsing under impossible weight. I stumbled, clutching my chest, but the figure had vanished, or perhaps it had gone somewhere worse inside me. The dripping stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable, pressing against my skull until my vision blurred. In the stillness, I felt the faintest whisper rise in my head, not with words, but with the absolute certainty that I was no longer alone in my own skin. And when I raised my hand to wipe the sweat from my brow, the movement didn't feel like mine. I woke up in the security office. The monitors flickered. The mall was quiet again. I checked my log. It said I never left the office, but my shoes were covered in mud, and in my locker was a train ticket with my name on it.